Hello, it's Beth of Beth-Schneider.com, integrating spiritual and financial freedom. That way maybe living full spectrum lives. So greetings to you from the shores of San Francisco. Totally impromptu. I'm out doing interviews for a research study I'm working on, and had a few minutes, and where am I? I didn't even know I'd discovered this great spot on this gray, damp day. But what I want to talk about today with you is overcoming self-sabotage and understanding a little bit. Most people deal with the experience of self-sabotage, of getting in your own way, or maybe when things are rolling along well, all of a sudden to kind of go back to some old patterns. So first I want to give an example of how I understand that these patterns get set up. So for example, these patterns originate from some kind of a survival mechanism at some point, but in other, like as life goes on, they're no longer suited. For example, to just make the point, let's say you're in a situation where the option in that situation was either to be beaten up or killed, and so you went with the getting beaten up. So you could say, you know, that getting beaten up allowed you to survive the other alternative, which was getting killed. So now there's like a program that's set up that like getting beat up is somehow a path to surviving, when really in other circumstances, more normal circumstances, that wouldn't really be the case at all. So we all have things. So in my case, I'll share with you my own story, which has to do with food and eating, because the way I was raised, the program that I was being given was that you could never be too rich or too thin, and it was all about appearance, and I was being put on a diet from basically the moment I was born. So my childlike sense of survival was to rebel against this idea, and that rebellion, that survival process really created a kind of a food disorder around food and eating and overeating as a way of escaping this idea of, you know, this total restriction on food. Now the point is that felt like surviving, like I am defending myself and creating freedom at the time, but then later in life it's a really strong program, and it doesn't serve at all to be, you know, overeating or binging, and it's completely an irrational choice, but it's so built in to the system from that earlier programming when it actually did make sense. So so to release an old program like that, first of all, what I have recognized from my own experience is that there is often a lot of guilt or shame that goes around observing that we fall into patterns of behavior and habits that don't take care of us at all, and it just doesn't make sense. Like, why am I doing this to myself still again? Or a return to this sort of comforting behavior that doesn't actually benefit my overall well-being at all. And it's really essential to neutralize it, to not have a self-judgment, because that is just keeping that vibration really low when we are judging ourselves as messing up, as failures, as falling short, when it's just like just like wires that are crossed. So release all judgment, realize that it's neutral, and that you are not the story either that started that first sort of survival mechanism choice, nor Are you any other story of overcoming it? You're not a story at all. You're a whole, complete being. And the only way to liberate ourselves from the ego stories that every single one of us has is to identify with our whole self, identifying with that of us that is infinite, that is one with all that is, because our individual egoic identities will always have limitations and stories. And yes, you can overcome, but if you overcome, then you can also undercome. And so my recommendation for living free of these patterns is drop all judgment, realize that it is not a reflection of who you inherently are. It was actually a program that made absolute sense when it was set in motion. And the way to release it is simply to drop judgment, because the judgment is an identification with being this flawed, feeble person who makes bad choices, and to recognize who you are in truth as spirit, as consciousness, as in balance. That's who you really are, regardless of how far away you might be feeling from it. Accept the truth of who you are and reflect on that truth, that you are an essential aspect of all that is, and celebrate your life. And it's just whichever way you're looking. You can look at yourself as the flawed, limited being, or as the perfect, complete, and whole being that you are in truth, and find freedom from these old patterns. And in that space of freedom, we have a higher vibration and greater energy, and able to focus on transforming our lives in marvelous ways that inspire us, and to live our passion, to take advantage of the digital economy and the ability to become financially independent in that way, and to inspire others to live their dreams and experience the bounty of life and live full spectrum lives. So peace to you today from San Francisco, the shores of San Francisco. Peace from Beth the Sybil. Blessings and love.